Yo, it's your boy, Daniel Bielak, back with another Youth Empowerment Podcast episode. This is number 29. I can't really get all those fingers up, but it's number 29 of the Youth Empowerment Podcast. I'm so grateful that almost 1 year later I'm continuing this, even if I took a break in between the two summers. I'm hoping to continue it. So today on the show we have Humayun Ahmed. I've known Humayun for the wonderful year, and he's just an extremely intelligent person, not just in the books and the textbooks, although he is insanely smart in that too. Also incredibly genuine. He tells me he's come to learn that there is a great value in two things: interdisciplinary and solving big problems. Those two things is exactly what he does. He started many education and research-based initiatives, one of which is the critically acclaimed 99.9. He's also a keynote speaker at 20 plus events, an editor-in-chief at 6.com, and he believes in leading via doing. So, without further ado, here is Humayun Ahmed on the Youth Empowerment Show. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you again. It's a pleasure being here.
It's really awesome catching up. You know, last time that we met in person was back in the most recent summer, right?
Right. Time flies.
Time flies, and you guys are doing amazing things. So thank you for coming. And so I want to start off right back at the beginning and ask, why did you co-found 99.9? And maybe explain for those who don't know what it is.
Well, 99.9 is a standardized test prep company, and we help students, particularly from high school all the way to graduate school, in taking different standardized admission tests. So for law school, there's LSAT. For medical school, there's MCAT. Right. Business school, there's GMAT, and along with SAT for high school students. And so I don't think that we ever thought of starting 99.9, and I think retrospectively there's an interesting paradox, and that is that oftentimes people start the company but they don't have an idea, or they start the company but they might not have a team.
Right.
But in our case, we didn't even know that we wanted to create a company. It's just that it just happened to be that we were doing things that aligned well with who we wanted, where we wanted to be, and the problem we were trying to solve. So I remember back in 2013, I met Sophia, and she was teaching at University of Toronto, and I loved teaching as well. And at that point in time, we had no idea about where this would go. The only thing was that we loved to teach, and we just started teaching.
Right. Okay.
And so over the period of time, not only did we create a lot of strategies that were mind-boggling because nobody else was doing it, and we were realizing, we just improved this amount of 50th percentile score in a matter of 2 days for things that people spend 6 months or years maybe sometimes improving.
Wow.
And when that happened, two other things that happened as well. One, we got a lot of feedback, so that was very crucial. But also, I think by working along with somebody on successive projects for a longer period of time allowed myself and Sophia to know each other. And I think that's very important, because oftentimes in a company, even before the company can take off, there is an implosion from inside. People are not gelled together. They don't have a tight-knit kind of understanding of how to work together. Right. And so we first got along working on different projects. We identified what we love to do, and it happened to solve a very strong problem. And when we kind of saw that there was so much demand that we didn't even have time to keep doing it for free, we ultimately made it a product or service where we standardized everything and kind of went from there onwards.
And you're one of the professors at 99.9. Or I wouldn't call you a professor, I would call you a discussion leader.
Yeah, I think I like to learn, and I think teaching is one way where I've always found new and better ways of explaining things.
Okay.
And I think there's always an internal dialogue inside myself, even when I'm not teaching. And part of that dialogue sometimes revolves around breaking down concepts and explaining them in ways which I have not explained before, or people have not seen them in that fashion. And so it's like a game. It's like an interesting, very curious process where I'm always kind of talking about it. And so I think that talking is fine, but I think that when it ends up helping students understand an idea that they haven't struggled with for years, it does have a lot of huge results.
Right, and your teaching style is comprehensiveness and consistency, correct?
Yes, I mean that's I would say mostly how I learn things. But when I'm teaching, I'm also teaching with the idea of how would I learn if I was in the student's shoes. So I think what ends up happening is when people approach material, they're trying to get either a grade in it, or they're trying to just go through it without knowing whether they really know it or not. And so my idea about doing anything, learning anything, has been to really become comfortable in the process and becoming really master of the subject. And it doesn't really involve just doing that particular thing. It can sometimes involve learning a bit of extra 10% going forward to help you understand the core content that you're in each episode.
And then but like, how do you practice like comprehensiveness and consistency? Like I understand that Sophia and Sohaib, they explained how you guys more so teach the learning aspect, and instead of the content is always there, but you teach people how to learn.
Right.
And I found that very intriguing and interesting. And so my question is how did you develop the empathy to realize that no, we're not doing the content, we're teaching people how to learn?
Right. Very interesting question. I think it all starts from a point of strong desire and interest, keen interest. First of all, you need to really figure out what do you like, basically.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think that I started from heavy focus in biological sciences, which I was great at, but I found out that physics was my favorite subject. And the reason for that was that it was very intuitive, and it was far more interesting in terms of explaining the world around me, the physical world around me, along with the biological world that the biological sciences tailor to. So for me, I think that when I was learning the material, I learned it in such a way where I could really wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning in between the sleep and be able to explain concepts. So I kind of learned it in a very, very I would say systematic manner. So the first lecture, or the fundamentals, were crucial, and I think this is what most people tend to forget or are not focusing. Where in every game, whether it's sports, basketball, any sports really, or in any profession, the fundamentals are those that you have to build upon. And so my fundamentals were always very, very strong. And what that translates into is when you're doing your first lecture in your semester, for example, at school, your first lecture is the most important thing that you need to understand. If you do not understand your first lecture, you will not understand the second one. And so really, even when I was doing the undergrad, it is quite surprising, but I pushed 300% into the first 4 weeks of my semester, and then the remaining semester was a sailing ride for me because everything else was just built upon that.
Yeah.
And so it's actually reverse, and in that sense, I think I'm counter or contrarian because I was chilling near the exams or ready 4 weeks in advance because everything else was built upon it, and also the momentum carries over. So if you're starting very, very strong, near the finals, your habits by that time are helping you get even more faster, because now it's just a breeze looking back at the material which you did probably 8 weeks back. And if you did that portion strong, you can now focus on the last portion, which is not going to be that difficult because it builds upon it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you have to have that awareness and a visualization of that end goal and realizing this is the best process for me to get there and allow me to do the other things that I need to do in the day, which I know you were a very busy man at that time. And so with regards to that, like, I just want to know, when you were in undergrad, you took eight
Yeah,
courses?
in my school, the usual pattern was taking 4 classes,
Right.
and I will comment over here an interesting thing about why I did. So I did take about 8 classes a semester, and I think that the more classes I had, the better I was, the more productive I was. But it was also because I think there was a sense of urgency that I was betting against the odds. And I think that's a very strong feeling.
Yeah.
And if you look at Elon Musk, for example, he's betting against the odds.
Yes.
And if you look at Steve Jobs, he was betting against the odds too. And I think that every revolutionizing company or a business or any work that you're doing that is betting against the odds, even the atom bomb project in the U.S. was 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And so when you're doing something against the tide, against the wind, and you're betting against the odds, you are not a passive participant. You're no longer in that position where you say, "Oh, should I do it?" It's like I must, and there is no other possibility.
There's no
it's a
option.
completely different mindset, completely different mindset. And I think that what I would like to say here is that rather than trying to mimic that, what people should do is ask themselves what strikes a chord among themselves. Because being genuine and authentic is the most strongest thing. So if somebody really, really likes to be a professional or Olympic swimmer, for example, and if you throw yourself into a pool or you go into a training camp and you see that you're far behind, you have to catch up, or you have to be it also depends where your goals are.
Right.
So your goals must be very, very high.
Yeah.
And paradoxically, because your goals are that high, you're able to secure and check mark all the things in between the journey, because your eyes are so far ahead in time that everything else in between becomes meaningless. It just becomes a byproduct.
Yeah, you're reverse engineering that very high up goal.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so I think for me, when I wanted to start in my undergrad, one of the things was, okay, well, I started with the intention of going to medical school, and here's a perfect example of what was happening in my head. Well, I said medical school requires a much more rigorous load, a much more rigorous load. And so what should I be doing right now to prepare myself for that load? And the answer was clear,
That makes sense.
I need to be pushing myself. And I'm so thankful, because at the end of the day, I started planning classes a year in advance.
Yeah.
And I pushed myself, and I wouldn't have known my capabilities unless I would have pushed myself out of the cliff. And
But it's so interesting that you say that, because not everybody's willing to take that setting themselves up into that, I have to do this, right? And it comes from the fear of failure. How do you get past that?
So it must be something that you deeply desire. It must be something that you deeply desire. And I think that a lot of people tend to miss this, because it's like, you have a lot of examples of people doing something and people saying, "Oh, he did it, let me do this thing as well and see if I get the same result." Well, you have to kind of have the prerequisites as well. So if you have a very strong desire to get something, then automatically you are aligned towards that like a laser. And then you go towards it with full ferocity. So it has to be who you are as a person and what kind of drives you. And so following notions about what society thinks you should do or what people around you would feel better is really a dangerous trap, because the day you realize that society wouldn't care, if you follow a certain path, you are in a hollow space, because now you realize you did something but it's for the wrong reasons.
And you're back at square one.
And you're back at square one.
Huh.
You're back at square one. So I think what I did was I was completely open-minded. I knew that medicine was a starting point, but as I was going through my journey in my classes, I learned 2 things. One, that across 56 classes that I took in undergrad, and I did
Only 56?
I did extremely well in all of them, but I think that the other thing was that I found that I was much more passionate in some versus the others. For example, I may have had an alignment towards biology, but physics was like a ding 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 bell
Right.
for me, like, oh, I'm really loving physics. Or English literature, for example, which was the most significant and impactful class of my entire undergrad, along with bioethics. So if I were to place a scale and say, okay, what was the scale, what were the two most important classes? Bioethics and English literature was here, and 54 classes were here. And this scale would heavily go on this side, if the scale would tip over.
Right.
Because the amount of critical learning and the amount of thinking, reflection that enabled me to know me as a person was much more impactful than learning a bunch of facts and then making sure that you know it on the day of test or not.
Yo, it's your boy, Daniel Bielak, and you're now at the midway mark of this episode. Usually, the midway mark is where I would thank a sponsor of the episode, but I don't have any sponsors right now. So, I'm gonna thank you guys for tuning in to this dang awesome episode, and I'm gonna say that in the next half, it gets even better. You got no idea as to what is coming, but I will say, we go deep in a lot of things, like in school, like in conversation, communication, oh my goodness. Alright guys, here's the second half. And in between episodes, in between like first half and second half would be a great time to go grab a snack, grab some coffee. You know, if you're about to leave the car, then like go do what you gotta do, and then come back and listen to this half. Okay, here it is, the second half.
In all the classes that you took, and you know, you applied yourself full-heartedly, 300%, like you were saying. We live in an age where everything, you have to keep up with everything, right? I don't know how well the school system does that. What is your opinion on the education system and schooling right now?
Great question. I mean, I love the question because for two reasons. One, I think that there are a lot of pros, good things about the education system, but there are also some things that are not good, in my opinion, and I will elaborate about that.
Okay.
On the other hand, I think we live in an age where you have access to so many resources that you don't have to wait for classes to really dictate your education.
Exactly.
And again, this comes down to my philosophy about what really education is. And I think education to me is not supposed to be a means for making money, although that is a result of the real purpose of education is knowing who you are, what matters to you, and what problems you want to solve. Now this is a completely different way of looking at the things.
Yes, it is.
What ends up happening is, it's not like people who are getting educated and then they get in jobs are not solving problems. They are solving problems, but they're getting the job first and solving problems later. What I'm saying is, if you focus on education and say, okay, what problems do you want to solve? You say, okay, this is the problem I want to solve, therefore this is the education I want to do. If you look at 1950s and 60s, the flurry of inventions that were being made in the U.S. in the Department of Defense, DARPA, in the technological sector, producing microchips, and then later on you had a lot of these companies like Microsoft and Apple and all that. These were the people who were who had, for example, no background in computer science, but then they said, oh, I want to probably be part of this. They went back to school. They were not in mid-20s. They were probably people in mid-30s, mid-20s. They had finished their traditional school. They said, okay, this is the problem I want to solve, or this is the thing I want to be part of. The excitement was genuine. The focus was very, very organic. It was not something that they had been planning because of the fact that they were told. And then they went and they were part of something which was really, really momentous in terms of having an impact around the world.
What it sounds like, a lot of what you're saying is you have to be very focused on the end goal as well, but you have to love the journey just as much. And one of the things that I was reading when I was about you was that you really love the journey. You really love how you're going against the odds, contrary to what everybody else is, taking the path less traveled.
Right.
Why do you love that?
I think I like to, first of all, I like to compete. That's one thing about me, that I think that, and not competing for the sake of competition, or for the sake of it. I think that competing is, for me, a symbol for progress, a symbol for becoming better, and having an eye on the bigger goal. I think that when you are progressing or doing something and growing as a person, you have to put in a lot. You either come in from a position of inspiration or desperation. But in either case, you are putting in a lot of energy going forward. And that can only happen if you have a lot of positive energy and you know what the goal is. So just, if you could repeat the question, I could answer. I think I forgot the later part of the question I wanted to answer. Could you? The question was about.
It was about. That's a great question.
It's okay. I think you tend to get it.
So it was about loving the journey and
yes,
loving the challenge and facing against the odds.
Yes. So I think the journey is very important, because if you don't love what you do, and again this comes back to who you are as a person and what strikes a chord within you. And I think that for me personally, I love asking interesting research questions. And because I find that asking research questions is a way to solving society's problems and adding to the wealth of that intellectual wealth that we have. Okay. What ends up happening is that there's one side of solving problems where we're able to incrementally solve problems, whatever we are facing. There are other class of problems which basically change the way we operate, change the way things are done. Example, well, when was the last time a cancer drug was developed? 1950s. 1950s.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you think
That
about
long
it,
ago.
1950s and 60s was the last time a cancer drug was. Yes, the drug was developed. Now it took about 15 years for them to be approved by clinical trials. 20 years to get them approved by FDA. 20 years more to get them cheaper enough that they could be accessible. And now we are heading 2000s. And so who is going to come out and or march towards those efforts to find a new drug which can combat cancer? So my thing has been that research is a great way, not just medical research. I'm fascinated by asking interesting questions in economics, in philosophy. Right now I'm also doing research in health policy. So we're looking at Canadian medical or health regulatory system. And right now the questions are so interesting because we're doing something that nobody has ever attempted in the past 50 or 100 years. And the questions will help us understand how we should move forward. So I think that not all
you for doing that.
Sorry?
I applaud you for doing that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I mean, you as a person who is going forward, or as a student, I would always say that you can never ask, oh, I want to work with the CEO, or I want to work with that researcher. What you can do is you can take one step at a time. You have to first ask yourself what really is something that strikes a chord within you. Right. And I think that is a very, very strong thing, because oftentimes people are reared up with the understanding that, oh, you are going to do that, or you are supposed to do that because, well, why? Because we think that's prestigious. Well, because it's prestigious, it makes a lot of money, it's a lot of stability. And I think that it's quite paradoxical when you think about stability. How much America has gained stability, and I'm not talking about this decade or the previous decade, but I'm talking about that by being disruptive and being transformational in terms of inventions and in terms of creating products, the U.S. has created far more stability in terms of their economy. Now, of course, there's so many variables. There's politics, the financial system, and all that comes into play as well. But stability, I think, is one thing that tends to underscore the idea that people need to find more transformational ways of going about doing things.
Very interesting, challenging the way that things have been done and doing them your own way, right?
Yeah.
And bouncing from that, I want to know, you named it how all these people went contrary and then they got their success, right? So would you say success requires sacrifice, or would you say success requires hard work and patience? Or is it a bit of both?
I don't think so. I have a bit of a different response. I don't think it requires either one of them.
Oh.
And it's a very different response. And the
I'm
reason I say,
intrigued.
and I think I say that because to me, success is when you are doing something that you want to do, no matter in the way you want to do, and whenever you want to do, and wherever you want to do. And when you are doing something of that sort, there are no more sacrifices. You're not giving up something. You're doing whatever you want to do, wherever you want to do, and exactly the same thing. And about hard work, when you're doing something that you really love, the work is not hard at all. And it's not patient at all, because what would you do rather? What would you rather be doing except what you love to do? Mm-hmm. So I think that again it comes down to now of course I cannot say that it's a generalization. There are moments in life where people have circumstances where they have to battle against the wind, or where they have situations like loans and debts and family illnesses, and that's quite unfortunate. But again, I think that apart from those exceptions, and of course you have to work towards that. You're not born with the work that you want to do perfectly. It's like you have to push yourself to kind of say, okay, let me start with this, and then sooner or later, if you keep on looking, you will find something that will catch your curiosity, or will catch your imagination in such a way that you would just love to be hooked on that. And from there onwards, I think it's a process of developing yourself and finding more about yourself, and that process keeps on going.
Before we get into the final few questions here, I really want to acknowledge you for the work that you're doing, and seriously, like the disrupting work that you're doing on your own, but everything that you're building with a team and the people that you're working with, you're changing lives.
Thank you so much. No, I mean, I don't think that I'm doing anything special. I should say that because I think it's at a day at a time. There are a lot of days where things don't seem to be going perfect at all. And I think there are a lot of days, sometimes weeks, where you feel kind of low and you don't have the complete idea. But I think that as long as you keep on doing what you need to be doing or what you want to be doing, you have to stay at it, because why did you choose it in the first place if you didn't seek out? So you have to choose something which is very strong, which you feel strongly about. Now, you don't have to have a complete picture about it, but you need to have some level, some vague idea about where you want to be, or what is something that really inspires you. So for me, when I was looking at my master's and looking at principal investigators or researchers I wanted to work with, I was really fascinated with researchers doing amazing work. Like one of them was reprogram the skin cell back to a neural stem cell.
Whoa!
Can you believe that? And it's happening right here in Toronto. Here in Toronto. Now, of course, I mean, I'm not saying that every person is going to do that, but if you look around, every person has their way of feeling fascinated. Yeah, right? Every person has a different kind of way of feeling excited about. And so, there are a lot of people working in microbiology labs. Other people are working in philosophy labs and thinking about things. And so, I mean, whatever really triggers or whatever inspires, a thought in you that I want to be something like that, hop on the journey, and it's and enjoy
it's rewarding.
Enjoy it.
Exactly.
Exactly. Enjoy it to the fullest, because if you don't enjoy your work, why do it in the first place? Why do it in the first place? Because at the end of the day, I think that you have to be true to yourself. You have to remain genuine. And part of being genuine is knowing yourself. And knowing yourself requires you to have self-awareness. And that self-awareness starts from asking yourself questions: who am I? And what it means to be here, or where do I want to be, or what do I believe in life, and asking these questions, which are very, very thought-provoking, but oftentimes these questions get silenced because the answers are sometimes already given, or people sometimes decide it for you. And I think that in order to be a very strong person, to have a very strong foundation, these answers need to be determined by yourself.
So I want to know, what's your definition of empowerment?
I guess empowerment is like finding yourself, really finding who you really are. And I think that, for example, I get a huge sense of happiness, for example, when I'm reading, literature, for example.
Right.
And I think that even though that might not be something that is, monetary by ordinary society standards, or something that people get into a career, for example, even though they are fantastic, right? And I always, and I myself am interested in it. So it's not like,
I understand.
But, again, empowerment is when you are like, when you know exactly who you are and what you want to do, and what problem you're trying to solve, and what really ticks you, what inspires you. Because I think that fundamentally, we're not born in a world with unlimited resources. We are not born in a world where problems are already solved. We are born in a world where malaria exists, where diseases like polio exist, where diseases like AIDS exist. We're born in a world where economy or education was not there to begin with. Where we were born in a world where nothing was there to begin with, in the sense of whatever we have around ourselves. If you go about looking at the world and how much we have come about. And so I think that if you look around and you say, okay, how do you want to leave this world? What do you want to do to make a lasting impact?
Right.
What do you think will have a greatest impact? Or how can you be not great, but how can you be most kind of effective or impactful? Because there are a bunch of problems, and if you don't decide to do it, the people after you are gonna be are scratching their heads, and maybe by that time the problems are so huge that it's out of their control.
Right.
And so it is an understanding that it is within you, and I tell this to myself a lot. There are people who chose to get up and went ahead and did something, were in exactly the same position as somebody who didn't have anything, who were at scratch. But it was a matter of saying, oh, am I going to wait for somebody else to do it?
Or am I going to do it?
Or am I going to be the one doing it?
I like that.
And I think that if you are the one who's going to do it, then you're the one who's going to enjoy the ride, and going to be the one who's going to learn along the way a lot more than one can even imagine.
Final two questions. The first one being, we discussed a lot about education and the system, and a lot about the things in society. And you discussed a lot of things that students should be taught and things like that. So I want to know, if you could restructure the education system, what would that look like to you?
Well, I think that it's a massive and quite a complicated.
It's a massive question. I understand.
A question and a problem as well, because we have these humongous student debts and loans that are growing every year. Excuse me. And the part of the problem is that it has become sort of a business of making money, because all the universities, they have a huge sense of monopoly. And I was listening the other day. It's more a matter, like prestige is more a matter of exclusion. Of a university is more a matter of exclusion rather than, there's nothing that you can't learn on your own. I mean you don't need to go to university to pick up a book and read. You don't need somebody coming in. I mean, at the end of the day, if somebody wants to learn, they can learn regardless wherever they are. So it's not about an opportunity or not an opportunity, it's about an attitude. But targeting that education question, I think one thing that I would want the education system to incorporate in some way would be a level of personalization. Because right now, what I don't really like about education system is one size fits all strategy.
I agree.
And I think that it's a very primitive idea to say that you can have a class of 1,500 students or 150 students and one teacher, and then she will teach a class of 150
All of
students,
them.
and all it will apply. The learning will apply to all of them. Well,
Yeah.
what if like some students are visual, some students are auditory, some students
Are
don't.
applied
Yeah,
or
exactly,
kinesthetic or-
exactly,
I
and
understand.
so.
Yeah.
And so to say that one mode of learning is going to be sufficient to mask the unbelievable complexity of the brain.
Right.
The unbelievable complexity of the brain, even neurology or psychiatry,
We don't know
medicine.
anything
We
about
don't know
it.
anything
Yeah,
about
of
the
course,
brain at
yeah.
all. So I mean, it's if we have to evolve to a point where it becomes a bit more personalized and a bit
Yeah.
more directed towards the problem again.
Mhm.
Again, towards what problem are we trying to solve? Again, if it's going to be okay, these
On a
kids-
specific level for that individual. I understand.
Exactly.
And so my final question is, you, in everything that you do, and you can only teach one more lesson, one more, you can only do one more presentation, lead one more discussion, talk to your students for like one more time, right? What would that discussion title be, and what would you hope that your students take from it?
I think that it would be about. I think particularly about the role of education and the role of learning, and what it really should be, because it's not east or west. It's not this or that.
This school.
I think that even majority of the students coming at UFT here, have come in with a set idea about the need for education, and that would give them a decent job so that they can have a decent family and that they can support their expenses. I think this whole thing, cyclical loop, is I think not paying any dividends. I think what would pay dividends is if entire society is tailored towards solving problems. And I think if you're aimed towards solving problems, then money will flow, because you're paradoxically you're solving problems, and you will be rewarded for the work you did, for the merit you bring into the discussion or on the table, or for the labor you do, and the labor will be measured in terms of the rewards you get or the problem you solve in. And so I think that it all starts with being free in your mind. One, knowing exactly who you are and what you want, and I think this necessitates that you keep on looking and asking yourself who, at the bottom of the day, if nobody was looking and if you had $1 million, what would you do? There are many ways of phrasing that question, but I think it has to come after unlayering, like you have to remove the layers of prestige and layers of society and how people view you, and then come to the bottom. Who are you? And what do you want to do, or what would you like to do? And I think if it's something that catches your imagination, then it's going to turn your world completely upside down in a positive way. And it's going to go into a spiral where you'll be thankful for that.
And I'm thankful you came on today. Thank you so much for
Thank you. It
coming.
was a pleasure as well. Thank you.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! That was episode number 29 of the Youth Empowerment Podcast with Humayun Ahmed. I really hope you guys enjoyed that episode, and if you did, be sure to share it with your friends, with your family, with your grandparents, with those uncles and aunts. Share it with anybody you think it will impact in a positive way, because that's what we're about. We're about empowering the world, and so I hope that this episode was able to do that. On a more personal note, I would really, from the bottom of my heart, would like to thank Humayun. This episode was recorded quite a bit ago, and the reason it was recorded quite a long time ago and not posted till today was because I was going through this mental blockage in my head, and I was talking to people about it, but it wasn't until I had a few conversations leading up to the conversation with Humayun, and he was able to literally be there for me, not only as someone I look up to, but as a friend. And I want to thank him for giving me the courage to take this back on, and to giving me the drive to get back into doing what I love. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and to everybody else, I really hope that you'll continue watching throughout the journey. Peace.